On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're looking at the Atlantic Division, most notably the Boston Bruins. Where do the Lightning stack up against the Bruins after this offseason? We'll talk all about that and more. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I'd like to thank all of you for making us your first listen of the day. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'd like to thank you for making us your first watch of the day. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the pod wherever podcasts are distributed. That's anywhere where they're distributed in audio form and on YouTube as well. On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're discussing that we're beginning our segment, our long segment. It's going to carry over the next week or so, maybe the next two, heading into preseason as we look at the Atlantic Division. Where do the Lightning stack up after this very quiet offseason for them? And I think, for the most part, a very quiet offseason for the NHL. And so we'll be looking at each team individually in the division, see what they lost, see what they have gained. And we are looking at this episode at the Boston Bruins, a team that, quite frankly, is probably, I think, one of the most least likable teams in the NHL, at least to me, being obviously someone that follows the Tampa Bay Lightning as well as someone who was born in New York. So there's that New York-Boston hate there as well. So looking at the Boston Bruins, first notably looking at the Lightning, their record last year against the Boston Bruins in 4 matchups, as obviously the division opponents both play each other four times a year. They struggled against Boston. We're 1-2-1, picking up 3 points over the course of the season, and being outscored 12-8. And this was a very interesting, I didn't realize. I know the Lightning struggle here and there against their divisional opponents, but when you look at usually a team like Boston, who really it's been very well documented with the Bruins that the Bruins are one of those teams. They're kind of past their glory days. They've lost to Dano Chara. It looks like Patrice Bergeron is at the end of his career. He did come back for the offseason. They also got David Krejci back, who took a year off. So they do have some of the guys there that were part of those championship teams, or those teams that were close to winning championships. But they did lose some things over the last couple of years. They lost most notably Tuukka Rask. So that is something, obviously, I think criticized them the most for last season, because especially in the playoffs, because if you looked at this Bruins team, they were a team, to me at least, that wasn't really super imposing. And I think that's the thing that really played in their favor over the last couple of years, is that when you go into a game against the Bruins, whether it be at home in Tampa or up in Boston, you had, yes, that rough and tumble style that the Boston Bruins are so notably good at playing. But at the same time, it was their goaltending that really, Tuukka Rask, and that if you didn't get off to a good start, you were really going to struggle to over the course of the especially playoff series if you were playing them. And that was the thing that, whenever I look at the Lightning's run in the playoffs in 2020, going up against Boston, I think that was one of the defining series that really catapulted them. And so really, as much as I hate playing against Boston, but love to play against Boston, I think playing against them right before COVID hit, as well as playing them in the playoffs that year, was really something that really catapulted the Lightning. But so if you look at this Boston team, you got Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak on the first line. Really, that's a great line. I think that's one of the better lines in the league. And then it starts to, with any team, you start to see sort of thinning out as you go along here and there. Not really so much here. Um, as I'm looking, actually, I'm very pleasantly surprised by, how tough this team looks. Like I stated before, they got David Krejci back. They do have Taylor Hall and Jake Debrosk. There was some talk last year that Debrosk was going to leave Boston. He wasn't happy there for the time being. He is staying in Beantown. And then you look at Pavel Xhaka, Charlie Coyle, and Craig Smith, and then it kind of fizzles out on the fourth line, and then their defensive core: Lindholm, McAvoy, Grzelcyk, and Carlo, and Clifton on that third line pairing. And then this is where I feel the Lightning, along with very few teams out there, the Lightning win out, and that's obviously the goaltending situation. Jeremy Swayne and Linus Ullmark. A lot of people like Jeremy Swayne. For me at least, Jeremy Swayne is kind of for me, the jury is still out on whether or not he's able to be a long-term successful option there in Boston. There's a lot of people that really think he has a lot of upside. So, only time will tell. I kind of feel like those same people, and I'm not knocking this other player as well, but those people that say that about Swayman are also the same people that feel that Spencer Knight was going to be a good a good goaltender situation in Florida, and look how that really turned out. But how the Lightning are going to be able to really adjust to this Boston team, it really, like I've said before, and this comes down to any team, whether it be in the Atlantic Division or any team in the National Hockey League, it's not so much what the opposing team has, it's and how they adjust to that play. It's what Tampa will be able to do on, and that obviously will be the defining factor. And we have seen too many times over the past couple of years, most notably in this past playoffs against the Avalanche. Now, we'll take that with a grain of salt because there was some things that were in play during that Stanley Cup final, and I'm not making any excuses here. Colorado is simply the better team, but there was a lot of opportunities where the Lightning, and it goes back to the same old thing we've been talking about a ton of times here on this podcast over the last 3 years, is that Tampa getting the ball rolling early on, being able to set the tone early on, and we'll see that very often from Tampa. They're a very slow starting team, and when you look at a team like Boston, who is just as experienced in some areas, if you look at that line, if you look at that roster, compare that to Tampa, there are some areas where Tampa has the edge, like I previously stated, the goaltending. But at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is that doesn't mean anything. It's nice to look at on paper, but when you get on the ice, that's not going to count for anything if you don't go out there and assert yourself. And that has been the thorn in the lion's paw for Tampa Bay over the last couple of years. And yes, they have won 2 cups in the span of 3 years, and that is phenomenal, and that's great. And they've gone to 3 in that span as well. But really, if you really want to sum this up, the rest of the league is catching up to Tampa, and they see what Colorado did in the Stanley Cup final. And there is no better team that is probably going to take note of that and is going to be able to really dissect that and break it down better than this Boston Bruins veteran leadership. So we're going to have to see really over the course of the season, because like I said, you only get 4 shots at these guys over the course of the season. Is Tampa going to be able to make the most in 4 tries, 2 at home, 2 in Boston? We're going to have to wait and see. We're going to talk about more of it. I want to get into some of the players from Boston that Tampa Bay Lightning fans are going to have to watch out for. Some guys you may not realize, some guys you may have already heard of. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about the new initiative that the Locked On Podcast Network and us here on Locked On Lightning are rolling out. Now, it's the middle. Summer is coming to an end. And listen, Labor Day is right around the corner. We're all going to go out. We're all going to have a good time, but we got to do it safely here. Now, are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive drunk? But what's the worst that could happen? You can end up driving below the speed limit. It's no big deal, right? Well, wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everybody around you. Talk about a total buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different, you drive high, you get a DUI. So please be safe over the holiday weekend. Ask a friend to take you home. Take Uber. With everything out there, there's no excuse to drive drunk, to drive high. So go ahead and please be safe. So looking at the Boston Bruins. Now, like I said previously, that we are going to be looking at this team, and not only Boston Bruins, but every team in the division, and seeing how Tampa stacks up. And the reason why I want to do this is because, like I said at the beginning of the episode, it was not really an eventful offseason for Tampa. Yeah, there were some players there's some new faces that are now on this team, and there's some faces that have left that unfortunately are no longer with us. And really what it comes down to is that, with any sort of change in the offseason, all it really takes, believe it or not, with a hockey team is one player to come in, and that, whether one player to leave or one player to come in, and it just isn't a good fit or whatever the case may be. So really with the adjustments that Boston has made, or the lack thereof that Tampa has made, it's going to be interesting to see how these two teams will stack up in the regular season. So I've already talked about, some of the players on the Boston team, but let's go over it. Some of the players that really are sticking out to me that I think are going to be, a thorn in the Tampa Bay Lightning side over the course of this season. So we've already spoken about, we've spoken at length about Brad Marchand here on Locked On Lightning over the past couple of years, and I mean, what you see is what you get. He's at a point in his career where he's still able to perform at a high level. He's still able to go out there and disrupt the flow of the opposing team, and I would expect more of the same this season. He does get hurt quite a bit here and there, but I think that Lightning fans, as much as you hate him, as much as you love to hate him, you got to give him a bunch of respect. He is one of the top players in the league when he's not doing nonsense on the ice. So another player, obviously, Patrice Bergeron, arguably one of the best defensive centermen in the National Hockey League in history. And it was interesting, kind of the little saga that was surrounding Boston and him this offseason. Is he going to come back? Is he going to retire? It turns out he did come back, signing a 1-year deal, $2.5 million. So, I guess glad to see him back, from a general hockey fan perspective. But at the same time, having him on the opposite ends of the ice, coming down the middle, it's going to be challenging for Tampa, considering that, they do have the tools to stop a guy like that, to stop a guy like Brad Marchand and other line mate David Pastrnak. But at the same time, like I said, that's all on paper. And yes, the Lightning have proven before in the past that they are able to do that. They are able to weather the storm. Win or lose, it seems like the Lightning are always extra hyped up for those games against Boston, especially in Boston. So, the energy is going to be there. I'm not going to be upset if the Lightning lose out in a tight game. I still think that they have the edge to where they should win those tight games based off of goaltending alone. I saw some comments after the Stanley Cup final, and maybe this was just recency bias, but there was a good number of people on Twitter that were going after Andre Vasilevsky saying, "Oh, this is it. We're going to start to see the decline of him." What people don't understand is that he's not even 30 yet. And yes, he is. He has a bunch of mileage on him over the last couple of years, but I think that was taken into account this offseason when getting in shape, when doing the necessary things to get ready for the 2022-23 season. So I think this year we're going to see a very revitalized Andre Vasilevsky. We're going to see a goaltender who is just as hungry as he normally is. And you're going to see it in these rivalry games because make no mistake, I firmly believe, even though, yes, everybody loves when they're talking about rivalries in the NHL, when they're talking about, especially the Atlantic Division, when they're looking at teams' games to watch on a nightly basis. Yes, it's the battle of the Sunshine State between the Panthers and the Lightning, but I think the games against the Bruins are the games that you almost want to make more of a priority on your list. If you're gonna have to choose between watching the Panthers or the Bruins when the Lightning roll in town or when they come to Amalie, I think Boston is going to be that team because Boston plays every game as if it's game 7 in the playoffs. And I think that is a good test to see where the Lightning are at any point in the season. Like I said, that veteran leadership that they have, a lot of these guys that are on this team have been with them for the most part for a while now when they were successful, when they were making those deep runs in the playoffs. So I feel like whenever the Lightning run into Boston over the course of the season, I feel like that is going to be a good measuring stick to see where the Lightning are. If the Lightning are struggling at that point in the season, playing Boston is going to be a good measuring stick because then, or it's going to be sort of a good fire starter because listen, if the Lightning drop 3 in a row and then they have to go into Boston and win one to turn one around, that is the kind of game that's going to probably get out of hand. But at the same time, I feel like if the Lightning could come out and win that is the kind of game that could potentially turn things around at that point in time. So those are the kind of games I feel Lightning fans should be excited for, should look forward to, regardless of what the Lightning are currently doing at that point in time. So looking down the lineup, new addition to Boston. Going to be interesting to see how he gels with this Bruins team. And then is Pavel Xhaka. Pavel Xhaka, I was able to see him quite a bit during his time with the Devils. Very talented player. I think that he is going to be able to come in, add some scoring to that lineup, but at the same time, be able to play that physical hockey. Obviously, the Bruins are so accustomed to playing. And I'm going to be interested. And right now, he is slated to be on the third line with Coyle and Smith. That's a grinder line if I've ever seen one before. And that's going to be interesting to see how the Lightning up against those guys with Nemestikov, Paul, and Colton. Now, we know what we're going to get out of Paul. We know what we're going to get out of Ross Colton. But having Nemestikov there, and no disrespect to him, talented player, I don't know if Vladdy Nemestikov, we'll only see during the regular season what kind of player he morphs into. We do know that he does have the potential to put up points, and that's fantastic. That is something that the Lightning desperately need after losing a player like Andre Palat. So having a guy like that on your third line is going to be great. But how is Vladimir Nemestikov going to be able to adjust and handle the situations during these high-intensity physical playoff atmosphere-like games? And that is going to be something, we've spoken in great detail on this show over the last couple of years, and we have seen it. And the Lightning have dictated the conversation over the last couple of years. How important it is in the NHL. Like I said, the Lightning have set the table for the entire NHL, have laid out the blueprint, what it takes to consistently win at a high level in this league, and that is having a solid third line. And I think, like I said, Boston, that their line is going to be very dangerous. They're going to be very physical. They're going to put up the points. Now, if the Lightning could match that energy, could match that production in head-to-head games, that is going to be something that we're going to have to wait and see. Right now, I'm going to say maybe, like I said, Nick Paul, Ross Colton, you know what you're going to get out of them, especially in these kind of games. Vladimir Nemestikov hasn't really, he was with Dallas, he was with Colorado for a little bit, he was with the Rangers, stars, he's been all over the place. So, the experience is there. But playing in those type of games is different. It's one thing to play in the Western Conference. Let's face it, the talent level out in the Western Conference isn't exactly premier. I'm sure some fans might disagree. Yeah, there's stars out there and there's great, but I think that the Western Conference, other than for a handful of teams, you have a lot of middle of the pack teams. If you throw them into the Eastern Conference, some of those teams, some of those players may not be able to make the cut. They may not make the playoffs. If you didn't separate the East and the West, if you just had all the teams and the top 16 making the playoffs, I would say maybe maybe 2 or 3 or 4. I would say 3 to 4 of those teams would be Western Conference teams. That's just how I feel about it. It might sound a little crazy, but you know what? I'll change my tune later on in the season if that's the case. But yeah, we'll have to see how Nemestikov could be able to adjust in these games. But I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I'm saying that maybe the third line, that third line winger spot may change. Ideally for me, I would like to see Corey Perry on the third line. More likely than not, that is probably what's going to happen. So we'll see how that changes over the course of the season. And then real quick, looking at the defensive lines, the defensive things compared, and then wrap things up just a little bit. You got Hampus, Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy, very good first line. Charlie McAvoy, we know what he could do. Mark Grzelcyk and Brandon Carlo, I think, are two of the most annoying defensemen in the Eastern Conference, if not the NHL. Those guys, not going to really go out there and light it up, but are going to go out there and, like I said, disrupt this Boston team. If it's one thing that you have to tip your cap to, is their ability to disrupt the flow of the game and disrupt your flow, and they're going to try and get you out of your groove. And that's where they're so dangerous, because then they could flip the script on you very quickly. And then that last line, Forbort and Clifton, Connor Clifton. I really like Connor Clifton a lot. As much as I say that, I also dislike seeing him on the other team. So when they're playing Tampa, those defensive pairings from 1 to 3, very solid in my opinion for now, for the Boston Bruins. And then you obviously look at Tampa, Hedman, Foote. Like I stated on the previous episode, I don't think that these are set in stone. I would prefer to either see Bogosian or Chernak on the first line. We'll see how it change. We'll see how it might possibly change over the course of the season, or as we are going into the regular season. But yeah, I think the defensive lines are solid. I think they match up pretty well. Like I said, I think, and we'll talk about this obviously as the Lightning go into their first matchup against Boston, and we'll talk about that when that point in the season arrives. I think the third line is really what's going to be the defining factor in this game. Those third lines going at it, whether we have Nemestikov on the third line winger position, or if we have Corey Perry or somebody else. So we'll have to see how that shapes up at that point in time. But yeah, I think this Boston team, I don't think they're necessarily worse. I don't think they're necessarily better. I think that they're a team that they're going to start out strong. We're going to see them in the top 3, either in the 3rd or 4th spot to start the season. Just because, a team like this, they're going to go pedal to the metal. They're going to try and make up as many points as possible early on, because we know, and like I said, and this kind of goes hand in hand, is that yes, they are a veteran team. They have a lot of experience, but oftentimes with a very experienced veteran team, the downside to that is that a lot of those guys have been in the league for a while. Most notably Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. Also, we don't know what the Boston people are going to get out of David Krejci taking a year off, many years in the NHL as well. So we don't know how his body is going to react over the course of the season. So having those two guys possibly go down at certain points in the season, potentially at the same time, that is a situation, especially when they're two centermen, that could cause issues for Boston down the line and play into the Lightning's favor. So I think they're going to start out, like I said, third, fourth, maybe even the fifth spot in the division, try and accumulate as many points early on and then start to fizzle out when we get into March, early parts of March, mid-March. So we'll see how they do. Maybe they'll shock the world. I think they're still a playoff team. I just don't think that they are top of the line Eastern Conference powerhouses they used to be. Remember, they're only 3 years actually removed from winning the President's Trophy. So we'll see. I think that the Lightning should win, obviously, half of the games, 2 of the meetings. I think that they could win 3 out of 4 over the course of the season, but we'll have to wait and see. Things could drastically change on a dime in the NHL season. So wrapping things up, like I stated, we are going to be looking at each team in the Atlantic Division as we creep more and more towards the beginning of the NHL season. And we are going to have some guests on here. We're going to have some of the hosts from those shows. So keep an eye out for that. Like I previously stated in the beginning of the show, make sure to like and subscribe to the pod. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed. And we're also on YouTube. So if you're already watching this, subscribe, hit that notification button. So as soon as the newest episodes drop, you are aware and able to watch it. And go ahead and follow us on our social media pages, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. I'm available on Twitter at DenkyDank, DENKYD8NK. If you want to tweet to me questions or about, how the Lightning are looking, certain matchup concerns, whatever the case may be, go ahead and tweet to me or drop it in the comment section below. Also, let us know below, what do you think, how the Lightning are looking up against Boston thus far? Was I right in my assessment? Do you think that the Lightning have a chance to even potentially sweep Boston this year? Let us know below. But that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.